We adopted a 14-year-old out of our state foster care system.
Yes.
And that was a journey.
How did the entire adoption thing come about? Because it seemed like it just stormed into your life.
We went in over a year from being single and carefree to being spouse and parent.
You keep reinventing yourself.
We both said that, look, if you want to leave, you take the kids.
Then the whole weekend I'm thinking, what if he dies and we're mad at each other? Most of the time it's the man who's not wanting to take accountability.
Words are kind of like weapons. You know, you have your weapons for the battle. That attack can last several years.
How did you handle that? Because you don't want your kids to know you're going through something.
We grew up with our son. Apologizing to him over the years became a thing.
The adopted child, she had become pregnant at one point in time, and she came back. So we decided to adopt the baby because she wasn't ready to become, a parent. We didn't have friends that we could call to be like, hey, this child ran away again.
Even listening to it, I was like, I have no idea how to even think about this situation.
Have you ever wondered what adopting a teenager would be like? In this episode, we dig deep into the hardships of adopting a teenager and the lessons we can learn from 27 years of an incredible marriage.
Both of them have had such a fascinating journey and have helped each other through some crazy things. Today, let's welcome the host of the podcast, Beyond I Do, Byron and Margaret Mckie.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We're glad to be here.
Yes, definitely.
It's a pleasure having you guys.
We've been married 27 years.
Yeah, 27.
I have to count every year with him.
Yeah. Yep.
27 fabulous years.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What was the hardest challenge you guys had to face?
Family. I know for me, because I come from a pretty large family. I'm the youngest of 10 children. Mm-hmm. My mother had, my father had 2 children from a previous marriage. I'm the only one that my mother had,
Your
my mother and father had
Mm-hmm.
together, and my mother had everyone else. So we were technically, half siblings, but growing up, we never considered each other like step or half. It was my brother and my sister, and still to this day. But it was a struggle for me coming from a big family, and to learn that, she came first. And so that was the biggest adjustment for me,
For me, we had been friends, and all of a sudden in 97 we started to date. In January of 97, and by December of 97, we got married on the 13th, had our son on the 20th, and so we went in over a year from being single and carefree to being spouse and parent.
Yes.
And unlike him, I grew up as an only child. I had half siblings outside of the home, but I was the only one that my parents had together. And so I wasn't used to sharing. I wasn't used to those things. And that adjustment of being considerate of another person and having to work with someone was an adjustment for me. And over time, realizing some of the things that I brought from my childhood and from my past into our marriage and how that was affecting us. So just my individual growth for me has been the hardest part, and navigating that while still, being a parent, being a wife.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And when I got married, prior to that, I was living completely by myself. And so you have a sense of control over the place or in different aspects of your life.
Yes.
And suddenly you have to learn to be a team. And it's such a different journey suddenly. You have to truly work with someone else and appreciate the nuances they bring into marriage.
Yes.
How
Definitely.
did you guys make that work? What were the subtle adjustments that you had to make to flourish together?
Well, the adjustment was really, I think it was easier because we had such a long friendship and we kind of knew each other. But at the same time, we were learning each other. So, when the toe would get stepped on, you know, there would be some stepping on and walking off. But then, you know, it would
I had to go back and apologize.
It would be immediately followed with some type of apology. But then, you know,
I'm sorry.
short
I
amount
shouldn't
of
have
time.
said that.
Yeah. You know, like, hey, you know, that really hurt.
So, like I said, in 97, we were dating. We were friends. Mm. I found out we were pregnant and we moved in together. And as young and immature as we were, by the time we had our son and got married, he was 22, I was 23.
Yeah.
But we had one of the most mature conversations. We sat down and we said, look, what are we going to do? Are we going to get married and raise this child as husband and wife? Or are we just going to be friends and co-parent? Either way, I knew that he was going to be a good father. I knew that he was going to still be my friend and that we would be in each other's lives. Once we had that conversation and decided, okay, we're going to get married, then it became about staying married.
Yeah.
And it became about, like he said, he's the nice one. And my mouth was a little, I would say some things. And so I had to learn that my wants, my needs, my desires had to come secondary to our marriage and what that relationship needed. And so, and then he had to learn that as well, because youth and lack of maturity. And so once we decided that we're going to be married, we're going to be a family, we're going to be together, that becomes our focus. And so if there's something that I as the individual want, but it's not for the good of that marriage, then I need to put on my big girl pants and not do it or not have it. And so that's been our focus.
Yeah.
And it still is to this day. Individually, I think I could have a lot of things that I want if I didn't have to consider him and those pesky kids, but we still, you know, it's about us. We function as a unit.
Yeah.
And as our kids got older, I remember telling our kids, you know, you need to pick up, you need to do this, you need to do your chores. And they would get upset, and we'd tell them everything in this house produces. Yep. And so the whole thing was, in our home, we function as a team. And that helped me grow up a little bit.
Yeah. And also, you know, being the youngest of 10, I had to learn to share a lot. And also, you know, the ups and downs of relationships I learned from watching my siblings, my older siblings, in their relationships. I learned what I didn't want. I learned what I wanted in a relationship. So anything that she threw at me, I just learned to give her grace and about these things. And she also gave me grace for mistakes that I made. So it was just about, we grew together, and we learned a lot in a short amount of time about, you know, how to deal with those nuances. So
That's incredible. And what I heard, something that really resonated with me, is learning to understand that what serves the relationship may not be something that serves you.
Right.
How do you build that mindset as you're transitioning into married life or any stage of life where you have to start prioritizing something else, or you're becoming parents, for example? You're going to have kids. Now you're going to have to look at your family as a unit.
Right.
At each stage, there's a shift in your mindset.
yes.
How do you, I feel like you guys must be masters of this transition now. How do you keep doing it? And how do you keep reinventing yourself?
Not necessarily mastering this. It was basically, we both said that, look, if you want to leave, you take the kids.
That helped a lot. Whoever decides to leave gets full custody.
Yeah, full custody. And, you know, but I think that because of our friendship, it was harder to leave.
I think, too, if you're in a situation where you're trying to decide things like that, start thinking forward.
Yes.
And so if I'm upset about something, and when, you know, it doesn't happen frequently. It's been, a couple of months. That was our last upset. And we came out of it though.
Yep.
But when
Came
you
out.
start thinking forward and you think, okay, if we continue down this path, what is it going to
Right.
look like
Right.
5 days, 5 months, 5 years from now?
Yeah.
And then, okay, all I have to do is suck it up. I know I was wrong, or I know there was a better way. And
Yeah.
if I just suck it up and let him know, or if I come to her and say, we need to talk about this, because sometimes those things look very small when you start to look forward, and
Yeah.
it's really not worth it. Now, I'd never advocate for anyone to stay in a situation where they're physically, emotionally, or mentally abused. But in a lot of cases, if you really sit and think, you can work through those things if you have a partner
Yeah.
where there's mutual respect, there's mutual love, there's mutual like. You can work through those things. It's just somebody has to be the big kid and
Yeah,
be the first
yeah.
one. And that's
Yeah.
often where the problem is. Nobody wants to be
And,
the
and
big
you
kid.
know, my thing is too, like, you almost have to say, well, is this worth me busting up this marriage? Is it worth me telling people, well, our marriage didn't work because I continually told him to take the trash out. I had to tell him every week, and I got tired of telling him. And then people look at you like, well, that's it?
Right.
Just the trash? So, I mean, you just have to really look at what is it? What is the reason why? Now, there could be reasons. There could be childhood traumas. There could be, just maturity issues. Could be mental issues. So you have to be willing to take the time to, talk, have a discussion, figure that out, seek counseling, whatever you have to do to make sure that you're doing your part. And, I like my old buddy, Dr. Phil, used to say, you have to earn your way out of this relationship and not
Yeah.
just, be easy to walk away,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
ideally, in an ideal situation, that work would have been done prior to marriage.
Yeah.
You
ideally.
would be a happy, healthy, whole individual coming together with another happy, healthy, whole individual. But a lot of times that doesn't work, and you haven't dealt with things that you may not even realize are the root of, the behaviors. Oftentimes that doesn't happen though. And once we get into a situation and things start coming up, that's when we realize it. And you have to be willing and,
Yeah.
and courageous enough to work on those things. And it helps when you have a partner who is gracious enough to support you and to not hold those things against you.
Yes.
One of the most amazing parts about a relationship that I've noticed is the parts where you really need to grow become magnified when you're in a relationship. Suddenly
Yes.
it
Yes.
comes up. You realize, oh my God, there's this really sore wound that I have that needs to heal.
Yes.
There's this thing that I was fine until now, but suddenly this is affecting someone else. This is going to have a really huge impact on my partner, and I need to work on this. And I think that's the beauty of a relationship. It
Yes.
can help you understand what areas you need to grow.
Right. Right. And you want to always come out better on the other side than when
Yeah.
you started. And
Yeah.
that's when you find someone who is supportive and who is not only supportive of you as you are growing and changing, but also they take the time to look at themselves and grow
Yes.
where they need to grow. Once you get to the other side, you're like, you know what, that was silly that we were upset about that.
Yeah.
So that there's a satisfaction in that when you are learning and growing together and supporting each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys mentioned you had an upset 2 months ago. If I can ask, what happened that made you feel like, okay, this is a moment to remember?
AJ trying to push up some wounds now.
And
It'll also
it's one of
help to
those
understand.
things-
It'll also help to understand how you guys dealt with it and
Right.
how
Yes,
people can
yes.
learn from that situation.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where when we start to tell you, it's going to sound very silly in the
Yeah.
beginning. But it allowed us to get to the root of something. For one, we are currently in couples counseling ourselves because if we are prepared, we're wanting to help others, we have to make sure that we're still
Yeah.
doing the work for
Yes.
ourselves. And so as with each session, it's so funny, with each session we'll work through some things and we feel like we've made such progress, and then something else will come up and I'm like, well, I guess we'll have to talk about this next time. So we're in the grocery store and it was the self-checkout. And normally when we go through self-checkout, he does the scanning and I do the bagging. I am quicker with most things, and so I get impatient if I'm scanning and he's bagging too slowly. So he scans, I bag. And I was distracted by something and didn't realize he had been calling me. When he hit the total, it didn't take a discount off of something, and so he's kind of getting frantic and overwhelmed. It's crowded. We're trying to get out of there, and so he's like, I've got to go get another one because it didn't take this off, blah blah blah. And I said, wait, you just need to, and he says, no, I need to go get another one. And I said, but you need to, and he said, let me ask this person. And so he asked the checkout person. And the checkout guy comes over there and says, you just have to hit total and then it'll take the discount off. And so I said, that's what I was trying to tell you. Well, it's never done that with me. It's not about what it's ever done with you. I was trying to tell you that, but you kept cutting me off. You were dismissing me. And he said, well, I just thought I had to get another one. We get everything. We go to the vehicle, and as we're riding, I said, I didn't like how you spoke to me. You dismissed me.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I thought I was going to have to get another whatever. It wasn't coming off. It's never done it to me, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I get all of that. But in that moment, I was trying to tell you the solution, but you never let me finish. You were dismissing me. Well, that's not what I meant by it. I just thought that blah, 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 blah. And so that happened on a Friday night. I don't know if he immediately picked up on it Friday night, but by Saturday, he definitely knew I was not talking to him.
Yep.
So that Saturday, we kind of moved around each other. Not many words. And finally, that Sunday evening is when he finally came to me and begrudgingly came to me and said, okay, what is it? And I explained to him and I said, I felt dismissed and you've done that to me before. Sometimes I have the answer, but you're dismissing me before I can even share it with you.
Yeah.
And I said, and instead of listening to me when I said that, you started to defend what you were doing. And so he apologized and we were able to process through that with our therapist. Because then the whole weekend I'm thinking, what if he dies and we're mad at each other? What if I die and we're mad at like I'm thinking that far ahead.
Yeah.
I know.
But at the same time, because that was something that we had been through before, I wanted him to understand what it, how it made me feel and what I meant by it. And I'm in individual therapy, still working through my own things. So I struggle with how to communicate that with him in a way that he's understanding it and not, and I'm not nagging him, and I'm really addressing the issue and not bringing up everything else. And so, like I said, we process that with our therapist so that we can figure out how to get to the root of a situation. There again, not worrying about the individual, but our marriage and what's best for our marriage.
Yes.
Yeah. That is, thank you for sharing this. And I really appreciate the honesty. Byron, for you, it took you some time to realize that something's going on. Were you aware at that point that, because you mentioned there were no words, but there was a stage where you went to, okay, now I need to take a step. What was it that switched for you? And
honestly, at the time that it happened, like I said, it was like, I'm trying to explain myself. So, and I was like, well, she heard that. And then, so that evening, when she stopped speaking to me, I saw it. I knew it. I knew it then, but, there's that little stubborn part of us sometimes that's like, you know what? I'm going to let her have that right now. So, Go to bed. We go to bed, but we're on opposite side. We have a king size bed. She's all the way on that end, and I'm on my end. Okay. Well, she lay over there like that. I don't give a damn. And so we get up the next morning. She gets up. Doesn't even, normally we have our routine where we hug and kiss or even talk. She ain't said nothing to me. She just got up. We had to do a recording that day. Yeah, we was we had to do a recording that day.
Oh, that must have been tough.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was actually a podcast group that we're part of.
That's true. It was
so it wasn't necessarily recording, but it's the meeting we do on Saturdays. So we got up and did that, and got done with that. You hungry? No. Okay. All right. I'm gonna cook this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So we go about the day, still not talking. So I'm gonna let her have this. She won't be stubborn, whatever. So of course, quite naturally, Saturday goes by all day. We hadn't really had a conversation, just light stuff. Then Sunday comes by, so I'm like, okay, we got to nip this shit in the bud today, cause got the rest of the week. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
You gotta go to work.
I gotta go to work. We just can't go through it. We can't be Wednesday going through all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, finally Sunday evening I had left the house, went to go run a few errands. And then I was out there thinking like, man, you know what? Was life short? Something can happen to me. What if I'm like, she's thinking something can happen. I'm thinking the exact same thing. Like,
Oh man.
I go to the store and, somebody starts shooting or something. How are we going to,
Yep.
it'd be our last memory. So when I got back, I was like, look, what's going on? Tell me what's wrong. And so we talked and had our discussion. We laughed and cried. And we was good. After that. So it was my stubbornness that allowed it to go as long as it did.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, all you had to do was apologize. And I'm like,
Right. Just say, you don't have to even mean it. Just, I'm sorry for dismissing you. That's all.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
then my dumb ass still trying
way.
to defend it.
Yeah. It does.
Actually, yeah. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Sorry.
It does. It goes like a lot of times I see situations between couples, and most of the time it's the man who's not wanting to take accountability or whatever. But if you say, I apologize for X, Y, and Z.
By the way, if you want the tools that will help you recover from conflicts due to communication issues in your marriage, I've created a free guide to help you with exactly that. You can grab it using the link below.
Oftentimes, that's what we want. We want acknowledgement, and we want you to apologize. Now, if you do it 2-3 times the same thing,
Yeah.
okay, well, then we need to look at the behavior or whatnot. But 9 times out of 10, if you can get him to apologize, he's not going to do it again because he doesn't want to apologize again.
Yeah, don't want to do that too much.
We have a philosophy in our marriage where this is a bit uncommon. I don't know if many people follow this. But we have a philosophy that no matter what happens, both sides had their involvement. So if I did something, maybe she could have responded differently. Or if she did something, I could have handled the situation differently.
Yes.
So we always try to get to the place where we both are apologizing. And we have found this to be so useful because it feels like we're both on level ground. It's not just you.
Yes.
It's not just me. And I find that to be such a fascinating thing. Have you guys navigated that space?
Oh yes, definitely.
In that same situation, like I said, me not speaking to him was not the best way to handle that. So for me, I need to be accountable for how I'm expressing myself. And then if I don't get the response that I want, how do I then respond next? And so learning how, like I said, learning how to process through those things, learning how to express ourselves. And then if it gets to a point where we do need that third party to help us to figure out, where we're stuck, then we do that. But both he and I tend to be good students, and so we can recognize when those things are happening. And we do pretty good with once we've gone through it, we recognize it. And if I say, okay, this feels like when this happened, then he'll stop. Or if he says, that's how you responded when such and such happened. and I can say, okay, well, let me try to respond better. So we do both, even whoever the catalyst is, that response is gonna
Yes.
either make or break the whole situation. So
And one of the things that we've done from the beginning was in our younger years when we were, having that struggle trying to communicate, in the argument phase. We necessarily didn't argue. We would just have long discussions. And
didn't
her
argue.
discussing and I'm listening most of the time. One of the things we would do, what I started doing is because I couldn't get my thoughts together. And so I would write a letter, and just give it to her. And everything out that I felt, this is my side of the story. Give her a chance to read it, and I would always give it to her when I was on the way to work. So I worked like 12-hour shifts, so she's got all day to think about what I read, what I wrote down, you know what I'm saying? And that would give her time to process. And, sometimes that's how we communicate it. And then we learn to incorporate that throughout time, Sometimes you can't have those discussions, or you don't have time, or, you've got situation with the kids, especially when they're younger.
Right.
So sometimes you have to have those discussions on paper,
Yeah.
or text, just text
Right.
each other like, hey,
Yeah.
this is how I'm feeling about this situation. And, to get it out there so that the words are out there. Everybody has their, I say the words are kind of like weapons. You have your weapons for the battle.
Yeah.
And all the words are out there so you can sift through and say, okay. And then we can go through the emotions of those words. And, that way you can understand where I was coming from at that time. I can understand where you were coming from.
Yeah.
And that helped us to navigate things a lot better. So now it's easier to just have the discussion now because we're not bogged down by those silly little nuances,
And I in the beginning, especially, I would say things that should not have been said in the heat of the moment. And so with writing those things out, as opposed to just letting things come out, I can write it and then look back and go, oh gosh, don't say that.
Yeah.
That's not nice. Because once you say it, you can't take
And I
it
think
back.
the point needs to be to express your feelings and not attack.
Right.
Because that attack can last several years. You can go down. It's couples fighting over. They have differences of 20 years over something that they argued about 20 years ago. Well, you said this, and I'll never forget that. And you don't want that type of thought to be going through their mind.
Yeah.
And we have them. I mean, we all
It's
have
part
them.
of
I mean,
it.
you're young and you're stupid and you're immature, and it's like, I got her told. Yeah, you got her told. She ain't gonna forget.
Yeah. 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 And, I just want to highlight something. When one way of communication doesn't work, it's important to find a different way that'll work for both of you. And this
Right.
was such a great example where you found that just writing takes some of that high energy off, and because
Yes.
you can just sit with it before you respond. So it gives you a chance to respond rather than react.
Right.
Which is
Exactly.
such a
Right.
cool thing.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
What do you guys do when you are in a spat and you had kids? Like, how did you handle that? Because you don't want your kids to know you're going through something or them be impacted by what's happening between you guys. How did you manage that situation?
Well, that took a lot of strategicness on the part of, if there was an issue, usually it was me doing something wrong, should be like, I want to talk to you later. And what we purposely done over the years was, once we put the kids to bed at night, that was our time to kind of bond, right before, bed the next, before we went to work the next day. So it usually be 30 minutes to an hour sometimes. And that meant sometimes we may, if there was a situation, we might be sleeping the next day because we might be up 1, 2 o'clock in the morning talking about whatever the issue is. But, that was our time to hash out those things. We tried our best to not display any type of arguing in front of the kids. because they didn't sign up for this. They didn't ask to be brought into this. So,
I grew up in a very chaotic household, and so I didn't want my kids to ever feel the way that I felt, and so that meant that we had to be peaceful, in front of them. And honestly, those things came few and far between for us, and I think that's because we prioritized that time at night to sit down, talk to each other, debrief. We prioritized liking each other and making sure that we're in a good place with our relationship. So when those things did come up, we would take that time to go through them, work through them, what have you. And neither of us wanted it to linger any longer than it would have to.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that having kids can make it really tricky so many times, because as parents, you always have this, you want to make sure they're fine. You want to make sure that they get the best, that you don't repeat certain mistakes that you saw.
Right.
So that need for strategy comes in so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
And parenting for us, like I said, we got married one week and we're parents the next.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, we grew up with our son. Apologizing to him over the years became a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I didn't know it was going to turn out that way. But as new parents, you make a decision, and you think you know the outcome, but you don't until you get on the other side. And as an adult, if I make a decision, it affects me. As a parent, I make a decision that also affects another human.
Yeah.
And so we had to learn, we had to compromise, we had to let our son know if, that's not what we intended. Sorry about that, son. Let's see if we can, do it a different way. And then after our 2 birth children, we adopted a 14-year-old out of our state foster care system.
Yes.
And that was a journey.
Yeah, it was a journey.
So that came with its own set of issues, and then questioning whether or not it was worth what our birth children were going through because of it. So it's even now, and we love parenting adults. For me, I love it much more because I feel like, okay, my damage is done. I can't mess y'all up any more than I have. Sorry. But to look at them now, they're phenomenal humans.
Yes,
and I'm like, I didn't mess them up half as much as I thought.
And even the adopted child, she come from a very gruesome environment. I mean, a lot worse than hers. And so that love, that grace that we extended to her, I mean, there were some issues, but she understands and she knows now that mom and daddy are here. And she had become pregnant at one point in time, and she came back. So we decided to adopt the baby because she wasn't ready to become, a parent. And so we got her at 4 months. So we raised her from 4 months to 8 years old. And at 8 years old, the oldest, she would keep her for the summer. And then so one particular summer, she was like, "Well, I think I want to raise her now." And we was like, "Well, we have at it."
Right.
And she's been with her ever since. So we have a wonderful communication with her and the baby. And she's not a baby anymore. She's 13. But
she's 14.
14.
Turned 14
I'm sorry.
in March.
Yeah, that's right. But it was just, an adjustment. And one of the things through all that, I think that going through that time with the adopted child, it taught us that, because everything that was going on was not our fault. It was not something that she did or I did. It was strictly what was going on with the child. So when all that was happening, we had to draw into each other because outside didn't understand that. You know, we didn't know anybody who adopted kids, so we didn't have friends that we could call and be like, hey, you know, this child done ran away again. So we had to, you know, turn into each other for, you know, support.
Yeah.
I think that helped strengthen us as well, you know, in those times. But for a while, the adoption was the A word. We used to call it.
Right.
That was a
We
cuss
didn't even
word in
say
our
it.
house. Don't want to hear that. We see those adoption commercials, be like, yeah, right, yeah.
But even with her now, she's 35 now.
Yes.
And we get text from her. She and I have a very close connection, and it's like if I'm having a really rough day, out of the blue, she'll text me and she'll say, "I'm so proud of you."
Yeah.
So even with that, and like I said, our birth kids, they're just good humans, and we're so proud of them. I struggled with when they were younger, and you know, how am I going to affect them? And I don't want to break them. I don't want to, you know. And so to see now, I didn't, you know, it's just been rewarding to see that now. And then there again, like you said, within a couple, a lot of those issues highlight the things you need to work on. And that's exactly what parenting was for me. I have realized some things that I needed to work on because as a child that I didn't get them.
I want to highlight something, which is you mentioned apologizing even to your son, like it was a part of your journey. And once again, the power of apology, right? Because having this awareness that you're taking a decision and it's not just impacting your life, it's impacting your child's life. And having the humility to accept that maybe that wasn't the right decision. Right. In the moment, we took this decision, but it wasn't the right one. And having that humility to apologize, I mean, that's beautiful. And I think everyone can learn from this.
I think that's one of the things that for me is important because the acknowledgement and the expression of remorse, that probably would have went a long way with me growing up and some of the things that I dealt with. So, yeah.
How did the entire adoption thing come about? Because it seemed like it just stormed into your life and you guys had to take a decision on the go. And what factors did you have to consider? Because I'm thinking of the person right now who has kids, and then there's this situation they're facing. What do they need to think about? How did you guys decide, okay, this is the step we need to take?
So when we were dating, before we even knew we would be married, we would ride around and we would plan our fantasy life, and we would say, we're going to have 2 kids by birth, and then we're going to adopt. We're going to have this big rainbow coalition family. And so that was kind of always the seed that was planted. Yeah. And after we had our 2 birth children, when I was pregnant with our second, I was a social worker for therapeutic foster kids. And so I'm right there in the midst of it. And we were like, we're going to have her. And then in a couple of years, we'll start adopting. And I was naive enough to think that because of my job that I had this inside depth of knowledge with what's going on. And so once our daughter was 2, we started the process to be approved for adoption. Throughout it, our goal was to help children. We felt like, you know, we have a home, we have open arms, we have big hearts. We want to help take care of these kids because if no one does it, they're going to grow up. They're going to be adults. They're not going to have, you know, the tools needed. And so... and
I think the goal was to, you know, try to get, a lot of times, a lot of older children, especially in those teenage years, they end up growing out of the system. So the goal was trying to catch one of them that, you know, just give them the love and the support that they needed, you know, until they become an adult. That was the thought process.
So that brings me to advice advice point 1. It's not best practices
No, it's
to
not.
adopt
It's not.
out of birth order.
No, it's not.
Now, they told us that,
Yeah.
but I knew better.
We
According to
knew it was
me.
going to change the world.
So that was one of the first things that we did. We probably shouldn't. We had, at the time, our birth children were 2 and 6. And so you think about, you have the oldest and the youngest, and you have the dynamics that they have in place, and you bring in a teenager.
Yeah.
So the youngest, the oldest is now the middle, and the youngest now has these 2 older siblings telling her what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you adopt a teenager out of that's been in state custody, that's been in the state system, they're there for a reason. And while you're looking at the paperwork, it may not look that bad, but they're there for a reason. And our daughter, her birth mom, had her in and out of the system from the time she was an infant. And then finally at 12, she actually gave up her right. And so if you think about what that does to a 12-year-old who's fully aware that you as my parent are giving me
Don't want me. Yes.
so we were naive, and we were still young ourselves. And so we were naive to think that it was going to be just this smooth thing, and we were just going to love all the problems away.
Yeah.
And she told us from the beginning, because we told her, we were honest with her and told her, we plan on adopting more kids.
Yep.
She said, I don't want you to adopt anyone else. We were like, she'll be fine once she's settled.
Yep.
And
She made sure that happened.
yeah, she but they started school, and everything's going good. And we had a friend who was working for a therapeutic foster agency, and she said, we're recruiting parents. And so we were like, we'll come to the recruitment meeting. So we explained to her and our son where we were going that evening.
Yep.
And she said, but I don't want you to adopt anyone else. And I said, we're just going to the meeting. And so we came back that evening, and she ran away that night.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So she was like, well, I guess she was for real.
She taught us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so we knew, like in that moment, that's when I knew this is something different we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because here it is, this child, she's hundreds of miles from where she's from originally. She has no idea about this place. She's been in school, met a couple of people, but to prove her point, she's willing to, in the middle of the night, leave.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is different. And so we struggled for the first couple of years with the running away and things like that. And then finally she ran away, and we didn't hear from her for
About
years.
About 5 years.
She called when she turned 18
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah.
request. Margaret, can you send my birth certificate and social security card to my mom's address? And I was just floored by this. At that point, we hadn't heard from her in 2 years. And I said, if you can call me after 2 years and call me by my first name and make this demand, you can figure out how to get a copy yourself. And so then we didn't hear from her until she was 21, and that's when she called her dad.
Yeah.
She said, Daddy, I want to come home, and I have a baby.
Yep.
And we brought her home thinking that we were going to be grandparents, but she wasn't ready. And so we told her that we needed to look into guardianship, because she was very erratic in her behaviors.
Yeah.
And my fear was that she was going to run and leave the baby with us, and we were not going to have any type of documentation with the baby.
Yeah.
And the more we looked into it, I think it came down to our insurance.
Yeah.
In order for her to be on our insurance, we had to adopt versus guardianship. And she agreed to it. Our oldest, she agreed to it. But when we went to sign paperwork, she had another meltdown.
Yep.
And I pulled her aside, and I was talking to her, and she looked me dead in my eyes and said, I told you I didn't want you to adopt anyone else.
Even though it was her baby.
And I told her, I said, you have to be kidding. Unless you're going to stay and do what you need to do, we need to make sure we can take care of her if you decide to leave. And after it was finalized, she did go. She ended up getting married. She had a couple of more kids.
Yeah, 2 more kids.
Ended up getting a divorce. She had it rough for a couple of years, but she has settled down now. Like I said, she has the baby with her now. She is with someone who has a child, so she has her daughter and her stepdaughter. She sees the other kids on a regular basis. Their dad has custody, but she sees them summer and holidays, and she has grown and matured. And she texts me and tells me she's proud. I make sure to let her know that I'm proud of her and I'm proud of the mother that she is, because I know that's important to her, being as though her birth mom was not what she needed her to be.
And one of the things that, I can honestly say that, for her, I know she texted me one day and she was like, I had talked to her on the phone, and she always told me, Daddy, I love you, thank you for being in my life. You are the best mother and dad that a child could have. And so she texted me after we got off the phone and she said, thank you for saving my life. And I told her, I said, even though we went through a lot, for her to feel that way and for her to think like that, then it was all worth it, and that was the goal, to save their life, Didn't know what they were going up against, didn't know what dangers they could be facing or where they could be now had we not been involved in her life. So, just for that text alone, it's like, okay, now all that made sense, because before then
it didn't make sense.
It didn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
And people would tell us, God is gonna bless y'all. We sitting there like, yeah, okay.
Is it worth it? There was a point in time where our birth daughter, when she turned 17, it was rough, and she was doing some really rough, destructive, just horrible things. And I remember our adopted child looked at her and went, "What is wrong with you? You've had mom and dad your whole life. Look at you. Look at how you're behaving." And I looked at her and I said, "Did you hear what she said? Do you hear who that's coming from?" She embraces what she's been through and the fact that she's on the other side of that. And her and her sisters, the girls and their brother, they get along now. That's another thing. As adults, they get along so much better. And because there again, when they were younger, I'm like, this is horrible. And he would say, "That's how siblings are." Really? Real? This is how they are. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna justify this, because they were horrible to each other. But they're very close now, and they will call each other out and they will look out for each other. So I'm glad of that.
That's great. That's great. You guys have done such an amazing job. I can't imagine what a journey that was. Even listening to it, I was like, I have no idea how to even think about this situation.
I don't either.
Yeah, but oh my
I
God.
don't know how we made it either.
Right.
I pray a lot more guys just listen to you and just learn from you, because the experiences you've had is incredible. So something I wanted to ask you was that I heard in quite a few podcasts you spoke about love is not enough. Just love is not enough. Just wanted to understand that philosophy and where does that come from?
Well, we tend to prefer, we use the term like over love. Love is kind of like almost
That's the easy part.
It's the easy part. It's almost like, you have a child, you love them. You have family members you love, your mother, your father, brother, your cousin, whoever, family members. You love them. But that does not mean you want to be around them 24/7. So for your mate, your spouse, your partner, is what's required to go through those times. You have to that person needs to be you have to like that person in order to put up with all their shit, for a better lack of choice words, and to extend that person grace, because it's that light that carries you. It's that light that says, you know what, I want to be around her 24/7. Anytime I'm off, we want to be together. you have to like that individual, and that's something that we came up with, and we realized like over love.
That friendship,
Yes.
that's what gets you through is you like each other. You can sit around, you can watch TV, you can laugh, you have your inside jokes, you have those things that just like with any friendship you have.
Yeah.
And those are the things that when I get upset because I feel like I've been dismissed, those are the things I miss.
Yeah.
That weekend I'm on the phone and I see something funny that I want to share with him, but I can't because I'm mad.
Yeah.
But then I'll forget when we're not mad.
Yep.
But those are the things that you miss. You miss those things that you do with your friend. I like who he is as a person. The love comes from how he treats me. The like comes from watching him with other people and how he is as a person. I like him. I like his personality, and that means a lot.
I was just gonna ask you, how do you know you guys like each other? Because it can change every day. Like, how do you know that I
Yes.
still like this person? And I know I love this. There's this thing that, I love this person. But how do you know you like them? How is it what you just said? You like how they are as an individual and you admire who they are as an individual?
That
Yes.
and you want to be around them, not
Yeah.
just in a sexual way, but just there's this concert coming up, let's go, and we have a good time. It may not be a group that I like, but I like spending time with him, and he gets excited. Or
Yeah.
we like comedy, so there's this comedian that's coming, let's go to the show. Those types of things where you want to be in each other's presence, not just in a sexual way, but
Yeah.
just because you like each other.
One of our favorite pastimes is just sitting on the couch. She does crocheting, and I have certain games on my iPad, and I also kind of mess around with music. But we'll sit there and we'll turn on some 2020 or Dateline, and she'll crochet, and we'll watch our shows. And that's and one of our favorite things, other two, is we'll hang out. We go to Walmart. We have our normal routine. We go in the store. We'll go by the clearance section first. And then we'll go by the automotive parts and things like that. And then we'll go by the yarn, and then we'll go get what we want to get. We just enjoy each other's company. And that's that likability. You have to like them in order to want to be around them. And there's nothing like being in a vehicle or being around somebody. You see couples and, like, they ain't said one word to each other. It's like, do y'all really like each other?
I picked out two things as you were talking about this. First, the ability to have fun with this person, which is what you just said, enjoying the companionship of this other person. Secondly, and this was really subtle that kind of I heard, being able to stay with each other without really doing anything with each other, which is what you
Yes.
spoke about. Just
Right.
being on the couch, just with each other, and you're comfortable. You enjoy it. You enjoy their presence. And you love
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is. We have those times, and that's the day to day. That's the everyday. We like to travel, so every now and then there's vacation time, and of course everyone is having fun on vacation. It's vacation, but that day to day, when you can exist, when there's peace. My whole thing has always been our home needs to be peaceful. Our
Yes.
home needs to be comfort for everyone. And so that comes from making sure that there's no tension between us, that we're in a good place. That's where it starts, really. Honestly, as a woman, it starts with me. Because a lot of times our emotions will set the tone for the rest. And so if I'm in a good place, he's in a good place, that sets the tone for the kids to be in a good place. And home needs to be safety. Home needs to be comfort.
Yes.
There's so much going on outside of home that home needs to be a place where we can come and feel safe and decompress. And that nothingness, there's comfort in that. I can be myself around him, and he takes me and accepts flaws and all.
Yep.
And so there's peace and comfort in that.
This has been such an incredible conversation, and I want to be respectful of your time because I have so many more questions to ask you guys. But I know you guys have a questionnaire for the audience that they can use to evaluate their relationship. I think it was the anniversary questionnaire. Can you just talk about it for a second?
We have their anniversary reflection questions, and the purpose is that once a year time to sit down, you reflect on your past and you think about those things that brought you together, and that nostalgia helps to set the tone. You look ahead for the future and you set goals together as well. And so that's something that when we started the podcast, we realized the value of. As we were going through that first year where we really talked about our marriage, it helped us so much. And that was year, 24? It helped us so much. We've learned so much about each other. And we had been together over 20 years at that point. And so those questions are designed to get you to reflect and think. And then once we started with the podcast, and now we have these meetings where we sit down and we're looking at the future, it's like we've created this thing together. And that's another layer of that relationship and something else that we're pouring into that's not the individual. So that's what those questions are, giving the time to reflect and to think about why you're together and then what you want to do moving forward.
Yeah, and it just made me think of one of the things that I encourage couples to do, to, just create that bond. Is one of the things that we did in the early years when we didn't have money to travel like we do now. But one of the things we used to do is we would, get a babysitter for the kids, and we would just get a hotel in like a town about, maybe drive 45 minutes to an hour away, and to get away from the home, all the stresses of life, and just to be able to just relax with each other, talk, reflect, or do nothing. Sometimes we would just eat, go back to the hotel room. She would, she's a teacher, so she would do her lesson plans, and I would do my thing, or we'd watch TV. But just being able to relax in that bonding time of us just being together, and of course in that time we would talk, especially traveling up there, just talk about things. If there's something bothering you, and it's creating that time, and that's intentional, what I call intentional time, and that's my favorite new word that I use. But being intentional about the time that you create for one another. And vacation doesn't always have to be, tripping. We got all these different itineraries. Every time we go on vacation, we set up time to just do nothing. And it's just us,
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we end this, I have a question that I ask all my guests. Yes. So what are 3 beliefs as a couple you guys have that most people would think is bizarre?
Prioritizing friendship in a relationship.
So our dog is getting ready to storm here. Our dog is...
That's okay.
Prioritizing friendship in a marriage. That one tends to get people... we're not saying we're our only friend. We have other friends, but we prioritize our friendship within our relationship. What's another one?
Like over love, most definitely. You have to like your partner. And we prefer, love is great. Love will get you there, but like is going to keep you there.
And the third thing, keep other people out of your relationship. You find people that you can, we had mentors, we had people, other married couples that we looked up to. We wanted the type of relationship they had. So with those couples, I could go to the wife, he could go to the husband. But then when we came together, we take what's valuable and meaningful to us and then apply what works in our marriage. And sometimes that looks totally different, and that's okay because that's what works for us.
Right. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. There was so many pearls of wisdom in this podcast. And guys, make sure to check out their podcast, and everything they have to say. Thank you. If you want to recover from marital conflicts even faster, click the link below to access the free guide I mentioned earlier.